Look at my powers, aren't they neat? I'm actually stronger than Arthur could be. Because your Geek History lesson on Mera is now in session.
Oh, I get that now.
Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I'm Jason, a crustacean Inman. Welcome to your Mind University, because this is the podcast where we take one character, one construct, or one, actually character, and talk to you a little bit about them in a little bit less than an hour, because you need to know their entire history, hence the title of the podcast, Geek History Lesson. Welcome to the podcast if you've never been here before.
Yes. Who are we talking about today, Jason?
I believe we are talking about The Little Mermaid. Is that correct?
I'm going to be completely honest. I would be much more excited if we were talking about The Little Mermaid.
Mera's a really cool character.
Mera is a super cool character, but Ariel holds a very special place in my heart. And also, I know she drives you crazy, so it would be fun.
Well, let's just say that in 1990 or 1991, whatever year we would have had that movie on videotape.
It came out in 89, so probably 91. Yeah.
My little sister, Kate, listened.
Dropping names.
Watch that movie over and over and over, like we all do.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we all
yeah,
do
yeah,
with kids.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
we had that favorite movie, but I was at the age where things were starting to get tired. But that has nothing to do with Mera.
No, we're talking about Mera today.
But it's interesting because they're both undersea characters with red hair that have, I'm going to give Ariel water powers. I mean, she can breathe underwater, so water powers.
Yeah, and also I definitely think when you look at the Aquaman movie, they are lifting very heavily from The Little Mermaid.
Oh, of course.
Iconography and inspiration. It begs a comparison, for sure.
She's iconic. And now I know Mera existed before.
Not before the myth, but before the Disney movie.
Yeah. I guess I don't know whether, I wonder if the Little Mermaid was always a red-haired mermaid girl.
I don't think so. My understanding of the Little Mermaid actually was that she was a bit inspired by Molly Ringwald, who, famous 80s redhead.
Either way, it's very coincidental that they look so similar.
Yes. Before we jump into the lesson, I do want to shout out our TAs because Mera has some love out there. This lesson was requested by @SweetDre, Grod Frankenstein, @SMDIDS, and Vicky Fox Martin. Thank you so much for asking for some Mera love.
There's some applause for you.
Yes, so
Now get to work.
Should we move into the first part of the podcast in that spirit?
Yes, let's go into the 10-cent origin. That is where Ashley is going to give you the Cliff Notes version of Mera, the character, in case you're going to an under-the-sea cocktail party and somebody asks you, hey, who's that girl, that very powerful woman?
Who's that girl?
What's that?
That's like a Drifter song.
Oh, okay. I was like, what Disney movie is that?
It's not.
In case you go to a under-the-sea cocktail party and somebody says, hey, who's that ginger that hangs out with Aquaman?
Yeah, truly. So your 10-cent origin for Mera is that she is a DC Comics character. She is an Atlantean princess / queen. I think right now she's the queen. Created by Jack Miller and Nick Cardy.
Ooh, old school creators.
Yeah, OG. Her first appearance was in Aquaman number 11. From September of 1963. 1963, great year for geekdom.
Yeah. Also, are you talking about Umbrella Academy? Is that where you're going with this?
Well, Umbrella Academy, Avengers, Doctor Who,
Yep.
a good year for all kinds of geeky stuff. She is originally from Zebel. Now, the pronunciation of this, who knows? This is what a Mera scribe says, so that's what I am now saying.
I've always heard it as Zebel. I think they say it as Zebel in the movie.
Well, my brain definitely thought it was Zebel, so.
Oh, okay.
But we're saying Zebel, which is another dimensional Atlantean kingdom that she ruled over. We will get a lot more into that as the lesson goes on. It's basically the same as Earth 1 Atlantis, except they live in Dimension Aqua, and they have Dimension Aqua powers, which means they're basically waterbenders, and so effectively more powerful than Earth 1 Atlanteans. In fact, I actually wrote an article about how Mera is way more powerful than Arthur for DC Comics, so it's canon. Her team affiliations and partnerships include Aquaman, the Justice League, and Justice League United. And her abilities are superhuman strength, stamina, speed, longevity, and durability, hydrokinesis, cryokinesis, frigikinesis, which I didn't know what that was. And so frigikinesis is control over snow and cold temperatures. Hydrothermokinesis, which is control over the temperature of water.
I also want to point out, now this was something that I heard in a lot of interviews with Peter David when he was writing Aquaman in the 90s for his very long 50-issue run.
Yeah, and famously our favorite Aquaman run.
He technically, it's funny, we would consider Aquaman and Mera to have superhuman strength, but they wouldn't consider that a superpower. To them, that's just like, because they're subjected to the extreme
water
pressures.
pressure, yeah.
So to them, that's just normal. I wanted to bring that up because I think it's a very interesting perspective.
Well, I would still consider that, as we understand. I'm guessing most of our listeners aren't from Atlantis. If you are, please send us your iTunes reviews.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're comparing their abilities to like your average human being.
Yeah. But it's just, it's one of those things where they would look at us as weak humans.
Yes.
They'd just be like, humans aren't very strong.
And so we are. The issue has been portrayed in live action by Amber Heard in the 2018 Aquaman movie and voiced by former podcast guest and actual goddess Susan Eisenberg in the Lego DC universe. Love her so much. Susan, you're the greatest. You're my hero. And I mentioned that I talked to a Mera scribe, so please be sure to stick around for the discussion where we're going to be talking to Danielle Paige, who reinvented and reimagined Mera for the DC Kids Mera Tidebreaker, the book that launched that line. We've been so excited to have her for a long time. We have a great discussion coming up. Now,
Gotta stick around.
Gotta stick around for the discussion and then for the hashtag stick around. That's the whole gig.
Don't give away all our secrets.
All of our secrets. Let's do our Meet Cute. Jason?
All right. Meet cute is a term that we stole from romantic comedies, where we're going to tell you how we first meeted and cuted this character.
Jason, where did you first meet cute Mera?
Oh, man.
And she's real cute, so.
I honestly don't remember.
That's okay. That's been our answer many times.
I have to assume it was Peter David's Aquaman run because she shows up in that. And
she's a badass in that.
And I did read that. And it was funny because I didn't really gain an appreciation for Mera until the event Blackest Night.
Mm-hmm. Are we going to talk about Blackest Night?
And I think because my real first introduction into Aquaman, just because that's when I was reading, was like Grant Morrison's JLA and Peter David's Aquaman, like Harpoon Hand Aquaman. Mm-hmm. I weirdly was a dolphin person more than a Mera person. So
I get that.
So every time Mera showed up, I kind of was like, who's this girl?
Mine was Justice League the Animated Series, as with so many iconic DC characters. And I fully remember describing her to friends in elementary school as Aquaman's Little Mermaid girlfriend because I didn't learn her name right away.
That's so funny. I love it.
Yeah, that's my meet
That's really cool
for Mera. And I will say, doing the research for this lesson is what really gave me an appreciation for Mera.
She's a badass, man.
Yes, and then doing my research, I've done some subsequent reading, and Mera has some really good stories.
I want to say this before we get into the History 101, which is the main meat of the lesson where Professor Ashley is going to take you through everything you need to know about Mera. I want to just throw this out there. In most comic book universes, and most of the time, it is female, the secondary or love interest of the main hero, and sometimes that's male, sometimes it's female.
It's typically female,
because, it's 20th century.
It's heteronormative patriarchy. Yep. That's what it is.
The 20th century, it's mainly female. I'm going to state this. Mera is one of the stronger and more interesting female love interest counterparts to all of comic bookdom. Like, I would put her up there with Lois Lane. I would put her up there with Selena Kyle. I would put her up there. I kind of ran out.
Jane Foster?
Sure. Yeah, I would. I think she is that compelling and interesting.
I love that she...
In the comic books, anyways.
Yes, for sure.
And she's definitely interesting in the movie, but I'm saying, like, in the actual comic books.
I love that she's not just a Lois Lane knockoff, because there is a ton of DC
Iris
universe.
West.
Look, and I'm not knocking that. Like, Iris has great moments as well, but there are a ton of characters that came out of this.
Is definitely a Lois Lane knockoff.
That came out of this, like, Silver Age where everybody got a girlfriend that are just Lois Lane light, and Mera is way more interested. Like, we already have Lois Lane. We don't need more. And you're never going to be Lois Lane.
I agree.
So yes, let's move into the History 101, which Jason already told you about. So Mera, when she was first introduced, came from Dimension Aqua. Great name for a kid's thing.
Okay.
Which existed as a parallel Earth, which is a super, super common theme for DC at the time and ultimately led to Crisis on Infinite Earths being necessary. If you haven't checked out our Crisis Club episodes, please check those out in the podcast feed or become a patron and go and see the full unedited video versions of those on the Patreon.
Patreon.com/Jawiin.
Jawiin.
Not patreon.com/Aqua. I bet that exists, but I don't know what that is.
Maybe it's that terrible 90s band.
I'm going to look it up.
Dimension Aqua remained an integral part of Mera's story until the 2011 event Brightest Day, Jason's favorite event, where it retconned it as a, quote, extra-dimensional penal colony, and it renamed it Zebel. So after 2011, Zebel was given its name. It was no longer Dimension Aqua, and it was basically underwater Australia.
Patreon.com/Aqua does exist. It looks like it's abandoned, though, so I'm just going to...
Okay. Well, someone go in there and scoop it up.
Fun fact.
Zebel became an exile for the former ancient subrace of Atlanteans, and this occurred during the wars that sunk Atlantis into the ocean. So when Atlantis broke off of Earth, fell into the ocean, they took this little neighborhood and they were like, this is where you go to prison now. Okay, great. Mera was the queen of Zebel and a member of the royal family before she became the queen of Atlantis. And fun fact, she was raised with her twin sister named Hila, Hila. That's the pronunciation that I am going with.
Hila?
Yeah.
Hyla?
I would say Hila.
Huh.
Because Mera is Latin for sea. So in the Latin pronunciation, it should be Hila.
Is Hila a Latin word as well?
Not to my knowledge.
I'm going to look it up.
But who knows? She's really not that important.
Okay.
Mera first shows up in...
I've never heard of that sister, by the way, ever.
She's pretty prominent throughout the Silver Age, but she doesn't do anything worth noting except she's kind of around. So when Mera first shows up, it's very much in a damsel in distress scenario where she's being chased from her kingdom by a bad guy named Liron, and she begs Aquaman and Aqualad to come to her aid. Jason, do you know the name of the OG original Aqualad?
Isn't it Garth?
It is Garth.
Okay, I didn't know if you were trying to trick me here.
I mean, I was trying to trick you.
Okay, but it's Garth.
It is Garth, the OG, because sometimes like
I was like, is there a secret Aqualad I have never heard of?
I mean, truly there could be, because remember when we did Donna Troy, I talked about the original Wonder Girl was a clone of Diana and she wasn't Donna, so no, it was Garth was the OG Aqualad. Just in case anyone is out there thinking that it's Jackson, it was Garth. So, of course, because they're nice superheroes, they help Mera oust Liron and regain her queendom. So she immediately, being like, oh my God, you saved me, I love you, abdicates her throne in order to move to Atlantis and marry Aquaman. Because 1960s. Very quickly, they have a son together named Arthur Curry Jr., a.k.a. Aqua Baby. That is not a joke. They call him the Aqua Baby, it's true, who very famously gets kidnapped and killed. In fact, Jason and I both talked a lot about that particular storyline, Death of a Prince, in our Best Aquaman Stories lesson that we did concurrently with the Aquaman movie. If you want to know more about that and why it's so good, that's our episode 237. But before that storyline comes into play, Mera is very much a trophy wife. Throughout a whole bunch of the Silver Age nonsense, she's an accessory to everything Aquaman has going on. She gets very little of real note to do. And part of this is kind of the traditions of storytelling that Jason and I talked about earlier. Part of this is because of the episodic nature of Silver Age comic book storytelling.
Yeah, we talk about that anytime we do like a villain.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever we get through their Silver Age, we generally like speed past the Silver Age because it's just a repetitive of they break out, they commit some goofy crime over here, they go back to jail. 5 issues later, they break out, they commit some goofy crime, they go back to jail. And it's basically that until usually the mid to late 70s, early 80s.
Yes, when we sort of start changing a little more into what's going to become the Bronze Age tradition.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I just say that so you know that when we continue to talk about Death of a Prince, it's because Mera's cycle is basically like Mera and Aquaman have a royal event. They get attacked. Mera goes and hides. Aquaman saves her. They're back on the throne by the end of the issue. Mera and Arthur have an event. They get attacked. She hides. He saves her. They're back on the throne at the end of the issue. That's kind of her storytelling. Depth of a Prince is the first time she really gets to be a person. And during that storyline, Black Manta kidnaps Aqua Baby and places him inside a translucent tank where he will suffocate. During this time, Mera returns to her homeworld for the first time in ages and ages and ages, because what is time? And she's there in order to find a scientist who can build a specific healing device capable of saving Aqua Baby. If you want to imagine the type of device that she's asking him to build, think the purple healing ray from the Amazons. Upon arriving in Dimension Aqua, Mera discovers that her homeland had been taken over by Liron. Remember that jerk from her very first appearance? And then he had thrown the scientist into the Great Pit, which is pretty much what you think it is. Mera saves the scientist, defeats Liron, gets her device. And Jason, based on the title of the storyline and the fact that you have read it, do you think Mera makes it back in time to save her son?
And this time around, maybe?
No.
But no.
No, of course she doesn't. Aqua Baby dies. There's a gigantic rift created between Arthur and Mera. And what's important about that is Arthur and Mera are a great couple, and they really complement each other. But from this point forward, there is always tension between them. And they do fight a lot for a superhero couple.
You know, but I actually always appreciated that about Aquaman because, again, we talk about it's hard not to compare all of these sort of comic book couples of the Silver Age.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that they fight because that's realistic.
Of course it is. It's not a bad thing. It's just something that I think makes them unique.
Because Superman and Lois's relationship was always like, Superman was like, I tricked you again, Lois. You couldn't figure out my secret identity. And Lois was like, gee, golly, I'm going to get you someday, Superman, but give me a smooch.
Yeah, and then a little later on, she's like, well, I'll just call you Smallville, and that's our love language. Now, Jason, superheroes usually deal with the death of a parent rather than the death of a child. Do you think in terms of storytelling that is equally resonant?
Yeah. I do know for a fact that this storyline was quite shocking when it was published, and I know it was actually kind of controversial as well. There was a lot of fight between the DC editors at the time of like, do we do this?
I was also going to say that even though there's not a direct team member or like creative thought between the two things, I don't think you get to the death of Jason Todd without the death of a prince.
I think that's a fair statement.
Because this is the first time that we tried something like that with one of our sort of big 7 Justice League characters.
Yep.
During their grieving process, Aquaman and Mera leave Atlantis and they move to another submerged city on the East Coast looking for a fresh start. But Aquaman left soon thereafter to join Justice League Detroit and was like, screw you, Mera, figure it out. Due to the lack of support during this difficult time, Mera has a breakdown and goes into an asylum in Atlantis in order to recover, but the experience does very little to help her. And that's just because, our approach to mental health was a little different back then in Atlantis than it is today.
Well, she did go way down below the ocean where I want to be. She may be. It's a deep cut reference for people. Let's see if they can figure it out. Hashtag Atlantis Talk.
Oh, man.
If you know that. I'm going to keep throwing references to this song. I know Ashley doesn't know what I'm referring to, but I'm going to keep going.
Then Atlantis was attacked, surprise, by a giant sentient jellyfish. Again, not a joke, really what happened. So Aquaman comes back to fight it, and Mera ends up attacking Arthur because she's had what is effectively a nervous breakdown. And she calls him, quote, She blames his weak genes as the ultimate responsibility for the death of Aqua Baby. So she's like,
oh, wait a minute. So she's like, look, my Zebel genes
are
stronger than your Atlantean genes. Even though that is a common thread.
If he'd been Zebelian, he would have survived the attack.
That is a common thread in a lot of Aquaman stories. And it's actually a thread that I really hate because I believe, and I might be remembering this wrong, I think there's 9 kingdoms under the ocean in the DC universe. I
think at their height there's 9. And it fluctuates depending on continuity.
And so Atlantis is, if you're going, let's go through Game of Thrones terms, Atlantis is sort of like King's Landing, and all the rest of the kingdoms sort of like bow to Atlantis. But there are so many stories about Atlantis, Aquaman uniting the kingdoms, and every story about that's like, we're better than you, we're stronger than you. Bah!
And it's like, obviously not if they're the ones in charge.
We're all under the ocean, you idiots.
Look, I know you're a crab, but come on. So during this fight where Mera's like, you have weak genes, Arthur shoves Mera into a long spire of rock with a piece of metal sticking out from it, runs it through her body, impales her, and kills her.
Sweet Jesus.
So Jason, is Aquaman the member of the Justice League that you expected to kill his wife?
To be honest with you, kind of.
Really?
Well, look, you got to realize I come from harpoon hand, bare-chested Conan the Barbarian.
This is pre-that,
Aquaman.
though.
For me, that's always Aquaman. You know, like I think the deep sea pressures get to you, and you get real tired of being way down below the ocean, where I want to be. She may be.
Oh boy. So now Arthur is faced with the question of what do you do with the dead body?
What? Whoa! He's like, now I got to underwater. Hide all the evidence?
No. He does, because most people, when you commit a horrible crime, want to cover it up. No. Aquaman takes Mera's corpse and puts it on display in the royal palace of Atlantis.
That sounds like Aquaman.
But spoiler alert, very quickly, it's like, no, Mera didn't die. She's able to heal from her injury because she has alien physiology because she's from Dimension Aqua.
Oh, God.
So, Jason.
She's not that different from Aquaman.
But she was in the Silver Age.
Okay.
So, Jason, do you think Aquaman was happy that Mera was alive?
But locked away in this tube that he put her in.
But alive.
Yeah, because they have an on and again, off again relationship. It's so funny. I think Arthur and Mera, their relationship is almost
troubling?
like, it's very troubling, but I was going to say it's almost John Lennon and Yoko Ono. It's very like, when it's hot, it's hot.
Yeah,
and when it's off, it is off. This is the period where John Lennon ran to Los Angeles, like
and ate Doritos.
Had so much cocaine, discovered Doritos, and like
the deep cut Jason Twitter reference,
and dated that other lady.
I think
her
name was May.
It doesn't matter. This is not the John Lennon Geek History lesson. But if you want to request
that,
you want to request it, my old friends.
Jason will do it in his
Doritos.
John Lesson impression the whole time. So the short answer is no, he was not happy. Mm-hmm. Instead, he said he was bitterly reminded of how little he knew her.
See, that's the thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Mera, of the Atlanteans, Mera and Garth are sort of like the happy-go-lucky Atlanteans. Like, they're sort of okay.
I love Garth.
Garth is cool.
I love Garth.
Arthur is the curmudgeon.
Arthur's a dick.
Arthur is such a curmudgeon.
So
even when he was young, he's a curmudgeon.
So Mera was understandably hurt by Arthur's reaction to her resurrection. So she no longer believed that she had a reason to stay on Earth 1. So she returned to Dimension Aqua and was never heard from again. Thank you so much for joining us for your Mera Geek History lesson. Just kidding. But Mera doesn't get up to very much from that point on until about the 90s when Peter David took over the main Aquaman title.
Woo!
In the much lauded best Aquaman run. And when we kind of pick up with Mera again in the 90s, she's trapped in the netherworld dimension being tortured by Thanatos or Xanatos, depending on your preferred pronunciation, who is a personification of death and an old enemy of Aquaman and also the gargoyles. It is revealed during that time that Mera had a second son named AJ.
I remember this.
Get it?
Arthur Jr.
Yes. Arthur Jr. Jr.
Well, yeah, because that's what Aquababy was named as well.
Yes, Arthur Curry Jr.
Yeah.
And readers are left in the dark about whether or not he is Arthur's baby or Thanatos' baby. So my next question was going to be, Jason, are you familiar with AJ? And you said yes.
Yeah, very.
Who did you think was his dad?
I always thought it was Arthur's. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make sense to make it Thanatos. Mm-hmm. It does for the story, that immediate story, but overall, when you think about comic books as the perpetual second act and the ongoing series, it's definitely Arthur's.
So AJ is revealed to have accelerated aging. So even though he appears to be about 10 years old when we first meet him in Harpoon Hand Aquaman, he is actually much younger than that. He's about 2 years old. And as a result, when Mera finally escapes Thanatos' hold on her, she and her son are incapable of returning to Earth 1 because he would rapidly die. So they just sort of disappear again for a little bit.
Yeah,
and this is the era when Arthur and Dolphin have their relationship. And And I can completely understand if you were a young man reading it at the time, why Dolphin is way more interesting. I don't think Dolphin is an uninteresting character. I think she's less interesting than Mera, but she's the sexy girlfriend.
I will say this, that now I think Mera is way more interesting. But when I first started reading Aquaman,
of course,
Dolphin was around and Mera was the crazy lady that visited every once in a while.
Yeah, and and throughout that run, her and Arthur are usually fighting.
Yeah.
Like they come to blows a lot in that first run. So they're absent from the series for a short while, only to be rediscovered when Arthur visits Oceanid, another dimension covered entirely by water, being exploited by aliens for its aquatic resources. There are literally no land masses on Oceanid, it's just a water world. So having to work together, Mera and Arthur defeat the aliens threatening Oceanid and elect to return to Atlantis to live together with AJ.
Where was that?
What?
Where did you say they go?
Oceanid?
No.
Atlantis.
Way down below the ocean, where I want to be, she may be? Atlantis?
Is that the theme song to Stargate Atlantis?
No. I will reveal.
You don't have to tell me. It's fine.
I will reveal
I'll
what
Google
this is.
it later.
There is a Donovan song called Atlantis.
Oh.
And when it gets to
Love Beloved by the Beatles.
I love this song. It's parodied by Futurama, and the
oh yeah,
the
in
main
their
theme is
Little Mermaid
is
episode.
way down below the ocean. Yeah, because it begins like here. I'll do my best Donovan impression. Here you go.
Okay.
The continent of Atlantis was an island which lay before the Great Flood in the area we now call the Atlantic Ocean. So great an area of land that from her western shores those beautiful sailors journeyed to the South and the North Americas with ease in their ships with painted sails.
And then
I know that song. Yeah. Yep. So Mera and Arthur decide they're going to go back to Atlantis, and they leave their baby on Oceanid as its version of Aquaman, basically to keep him from complicating the Aquaman title any further. And we could never see him again. Mera and Arthur reconcile, they work through their grief together, and they're able to be superheroes together. They're even able to get past the fact that Arthur had been messing about with Dolphin in Mera's absence while he was technically still married to her. In fact, Dolphin and Garth, who is Tempest by this point, no longer Aqualad, join them as official members of the Atlantean royal family. So I think that's really nice. Mera is so caring that she even delivers Dolphin and Tempest's baby, because Dolphin and Tempest get together. But then the triple whammy...
which I always thought was a little weird, but whatever.
I agree, but I see why you're like, well, why not try this? But then the triple whammy of Obsidian Age, Infinite Crisis, and 1 Year Later happens, and the DC universe from that point on basically does not allow the Aqua family to ever be happy again. During and right after Infinite Crisis, Mera leads a rebel faction focused on rebuilding Atlantis following its destruction at the hands of the Spectre.
Wait. Where?
Atlantis?
Oh, it didn't work. Hold on. And she is.
She is.
That was sorry. I thought that would work so better. I will stop.
So while they're rebuilding Atlantis after it was destroyed by the Spectre, Mera dies again in Aquaman, Sword of Atlantis. Excuse me.
The Spectre destroying Atlantis was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
It was a really big deal.
The Spectre basically destroys everything.
Now, do you know what Aquaman Sword of Atlantis is?
I mean, I have not read it, if that's what you're asking me.
So
this isn't the Aquaman lesson.
No. But it'll give some context to why they decided to kill Mera in that series.
Sure.
Because it is a weird choice. Fun fact, Aquaman dies in that series too. Now you're like, huh? So when they did the 1 year jump, right? At this point, Aquaman was not selling very well.
As is unfortunately often the case.
So this Aquaman Sword of Atlantis was sort of a revamp. It was written by Kurt Busiek. And what they did is they introduced this new, younger Arthur. Who was a brand new person. And they sort of made it, this was kind of a sword and sorcery book underneath the water. The Arthur Curry, who was the classic Aquaman, was like transformed into some weird squid creature. And he was sort of the Obi-Wan character. He was also killed in this series. This run is not terrible, but you could tell they were trying to introduce this guy as the new Aquaman. And it was like quickly revamped. Like it was quickly like ignored immediately.
I don't think the idea of bringing more sword and sorcery to Aquaman is a bad idea. Because I think when it excels because it's magic.
I agree.
You keep comparing it to Conan the Barbarian. There's a lot of Arthurian overtones. Even with Mera, like Mera is very much a Guinevere type. Sometimes a Morgana type as well if she's being the bad lady. But I don't think that's a bad thing. So I will add that to my personal recommended reading list. So she dies in Sword of Atlantis. There's a funeral with a bunch of members of the Justice League paying respects. And then she disappears from continuity again for like 5 hot minutes. Mera next crops up in Prelude to Blackest Night during Titans number 15, which reintroduced Tempest to the Titans roster, which I am always in favor of. I love the adult team still working together, where she is seen in mourning for Arthur as a narrative way to set up the potential conflict that will happen during Blackest Night itself. Spoilers for Blackest Night. Mera fights dead Aquaman. It's awesome.
And then Aquaman is resurrected.
And then he is. Readers learn during the same story that Atlantis had been destroyed, so there's a whole bunch of Aqua people who are like real sad and sort of wandering around being like, where do I live now? During Blackest Night itself, Tempest begs Mera to allow Arthur's remains to be interred in Atlantis, or whatever their version of interring things are under the sea. But before this can happen, they are attacked by Aquaman, Tula, Aqua Girl, OG Aqua Girl, and Dolphin, who are all now Black Lanterns. If you want a ton more detail on this than we're going to go into on the podcast, we are doing Blackest Night Club right now on Patreon, where we are diving into the miniseries, a bunch of subsequent spinoffs, and we are very passionate about the turn that Mera takes and how cool she is in Blackest Night, because I think for a lot of people, this is the first time, unless they were hardcore Aquaman readers, that they were like, oh, I get who this character is now.
It's like a 10-hour video docuseries, so go check that out over at patreon.com/Jawiin.
Yep. And we're not even done yet. So you can still hop on and be some of the first people to check that out. So in Blackest Night, Tempest is subsequently killed, but Mera manages to escape to the Hall of Justice to send out an escape signal where Firestorm finds her. And then from that point on, she becomes a really important part of what the Justice League gets up to while they are trying to protect Earth from the various Black Lanterns, and sort of subsequently when they build their own team of color core lanterns. Mera has a pretty important piece of information that she reveals on Blackest Night. She tells the Justice League that she was able to escape the Black Lanterns by keeping her emotions in check. And this becomes key to the good guys winning the battles going forward for the rest of this event. There's also a really cool moment where she basically gets inducted into the Justice League as a charter member for the first time. And she has a great scene with the Atom and Flash where she's like, I don't think I'm ready for this. And Flash has to talk them up into being ready. And then in the end, she gets a Red Lantern costume.
I was going to say, are we not going to, I was wondering if you were going to skip the Red Lantern. And I was like, that's a pretty important beat.
I'm trying to cover a lot of Blackest Night without getting too deep into Blackest Night. All right. And in the end, or towards the final battle, she gets chosen by a Black Lantern ring because of her rage and her grief.
You mean a Red Lantern ring?
Yes, that's what I meant. And gets truly what I think is the coolest version of her costume. I don't have the credits open in front of me right now, but whoever colored that issue did such a good job because, as the Little Mermaid illustrated for us, red hair with red-toned clothing can be a difficult task, and the orange of Mera's hair and the red of the Red Lantern and the red in her crown, it's so beautiful. And most of the characters during Blackest Night who become overtaken by red rings sort of fall to it. They're not able to get past it because it connects to your blood and your heart. Like the Red Lantern mythology is wild. We'll do a Red Lantern lesson someday. But Mera's one of the only ones who is able to sort of work past it and defeat it. Yeah. She becomes better by having been a Red Lantern, whereas most people are destroyed by it. And I think that from an emotional standpoint, that pretty much makes her one of the strongest emotional characters in the DC universe, which is really neat. So immediately after all of this, Mera is sort of given the opportunity of, do you want to stay with the Justice League? And she's not too sure about that because she has had to defeat Black Lantern Aquaman and Aqua Baby. And when she kills her child again, she says, I never wanted children. There's like a lot of darkness there. And she's not sure if she can handle that by having to face it every day as a full-on charter member of the Justice League. Then during Brightest Day, which I mentioned a little bit earlier at the beginning, her origins get totally retconned, and we learn that Mera lied to Arthur all this time. She was never a queen, but instead she had been a princess of Zebel, and Zebel is now a forgotten extra-dimensional penal colony sealed inside the Bermuda Triangle. There's no more Dimension Aqua. She's not an alien. She's just basically a lower caste than Arthur is by being an Atlantean.
What do you think about this retcon?
I'm mixed on it.
Okay.
I think it's good in a pared down post several crises event that Mera doesn't come from a different dimension or a different universe or a different Earth. But caste systems are always hard, and they're always hard to execute well.
Uh-huh.
And I think depending on who is writing the Aquaman story, sometimes I think this works really well for Mera, and sometimes I just think it's a really lazy crutch. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, I'll be honest with you. It's a little too similar just because I know the writer is Jeff Johns. It's very similar to what he does with the Indigo Lanterns when you learn that the Indigo Lanterns are also kind of a prison colony. Mm-hmm. So I think that is not coincidental. I think, his head was in the same space.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I will say that the extra dimensions are a little goofy.
And they're hard to manage, right? Which is why we sort of keep getting rid of them and walking them back.
It's because they're nebulous and they don't. It means nothing.
Yeah.
It makes more sense if that she's an Atlantean from a different kingdom.
I agree. Or if you want to make her an alien, make her from a different planet.
Yeah.
And then she comes to Earth for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess I'm 5 out of 10 on it. Mm-hmm. It's fine. So Mera and her sister, who is now called Siren, back in continuity, were trained to be soldiers and assassins bent on killing the king of Atlantis, and it was only falling in love with Arthur that kept Mera from murderizing him. This is basically meant to explain away her bouts of insanity, anger, and madness that are a result of her training coming to bear against her will and her trying to tamp that all down. She is also directly tied to Calderon after this, who we have a lesson on. It's episode 171.
The new Aqualad.
Yes.
The Young Justice Aqualad.
The gay Aqualad, who is a hybrid human Atlantean son of Black Manta, who Mera's father experimented on. She doesn't really meet him until he grows up to be a teen, but she always swore to come to his aid when needed because he didn't have parental figures to protect him. I really like their relationship and their bond.
Sure.
All of this came out because Siren basically showed up out of nowhere to kill the king of Atlantis, who was Aquaman, and looked suspiciously like Mera, so a bunch of stuff got explained. Then the New 52 happened, and none of this mattered. Jason, what is the New 52?
The New 52 is based off the event of Flashpoint. Barry Allen missed his mom, ran back in time so fast that he shattered the multiverse and basically reset DC continuity, except for Batman and Green Lantern, back to zero.
There you go. So in the New 52...
And Aquaman did not get reset either.
It sort of did. It got a soft reboot. Look, if Jeff Johns is writing it, it didn't really get rebooted.
Exactly.
Here, Mera is already married to Aquaman, and when he feels rejected by the superhero community and moves to Amnesty Bay, she basically follows in his wake. Mm-hmm. She gets called Aqua Woman for a little bit, which she never really called before, but the name doesn't stick. And faces the same ridicule as being called Aquaman. This version of Mera is super, super angry again, has the assassin origin story that was introduced right before New 52, because Jeff Johns is also the writer who turned her into a Red Lantern in Blackest Night, so that is clearly his in with the character. But she, New 52 Mera is angry. In fact, she is so angry that right after the Throne of Atlantis story, she's arrested by the police for violent assault.
Oh, boy.
In this story, she goes to war with Orm. She beats a bunch of humans into submission. She's lectured by a cop named Officer Watson, who is an old-time friend of Arthur's from school. And when a big, strong man tells her to calm down, she agrees and goes, you're right. And
Okay.
I hate it. While she's still in jail, she's attacked by the Dead King. The Dead King is a now only introduced greatest king of Atlantis who has come back to reclaim his throne. The dead king wants to know where Zebul is so that he can build an army. He drags Mera to the Bermuda Triangle, literally by her hair, to force her to reveal it to him, but she escapes and manages to make it to Zebul and warn them of his impending arrival. It is then revealed that the current king of Zebul is a dude named Nereus, who shows up a lot, who Mera was betrothed to before she abandoned him for Khal Drogo. In the comics, he's a creep with red hair, just like Mera, but Nereus is actually a character who was created by Homer, not Homer Simpson, Homer the writer, who is literally, quote, the old man in the sea, end quote, noted for his wisdom. So he's like a deep cut Latin and Greek mythology character brought up into DC Comics. So Nereus and Mera fight until they are subsequently frozen in ice by the dead king, who manages to sneak up on them. And this leads to the revelation that the dead king was the OG king of Atlantis this whole time, and he's been fighting for his throne. After being freed, Nereus stirs up more trouble by pledging his allegiance to the dead king instead of to Mera and Arthur, because the Zebellians hate Atlantis with all the deep, dark parts of their soul. The next storyline is called Scavenger. It's basically a giant battle. Arthur is knocked unconscious for 6 months, and Mera is missing after having been seen taken prisoner by the dead king. And so instead of taking advantage of her incredible waterbending powers, Mera just argues with Nereus about whether or not they should get married after all until Aquaman shows up to save her. But because she remained loyal to Arthur, Mera is often left in control of Atlantis from this point onward, because Arthur's basically always away doing more interesting Justice League stuff. So Mera gets to be more of a boss babe, and according to some fans, they consider her to be the true monarch of Atlantis rather than Arthur.
I'd agree with that.
I like that this story gives her this title, but I really don't like the fact that she's just a really angry female stereotype who still has no autonomy. Like, she doesn't achieve anything in this story by herself, which I think she is more than capable of doing. In universe, the Atlanteans don't actually like Mera that much because Arthur is the chosen one archetype, but she winds up winning over their council of elders due to her strong leadership skills. Yay! Then her first major foray from Atlantis after this time is to help Arthur reconnect with his mother Atlanta, who had previously faked her death. This is a storyline that you see cribbed in the Aquaman movie. Then Atlantis comes under attack by the kingdom of Thule, who use a time machine to bring forth another Atlantis from a parallel reality. After being left in charge of regular Atlantis, Mera appears to turn against Arthur and declares him an enemy of the state. It is later revealed that this was actually her sister Siren, who was acting as her, and Mera was in jail the whole time because, again, why let your most powerful character do anything? This event leads to the opening of an Atlantean embassy in Amnesty Bay, basically cribbing from Wonder Woman and Themyscira, but I'm not mad about it because Atlantis should totally have an embassy on land. And Mera goes to live on the surface for the first time as an ambassador, a role that she is uniquely suited for, and she immediately becomes a media darling because she looks like the Little Mermaid. And this is one of the first times that Atlantis and the surface world have a functional working relationship. Then DC Rebirth happens and sweeps about half of this under the rug. Jason, what's DC Rebirth?
It's just a revamp that they put DC Rebirth over.
There you go. That's actually, there's kind of no better way to describe it.
They literally didn't change anything. They just made a bunch of new number ones and put a blue banner on top.
So in DC Rebirth, Mera gets her very first ever solo series, written by Dan Abnett. And there's amazing covers on it by Nicholas Scott. So I remember when the covers were first coming out, I thought they were amazing. In 2018 is when it started. And I read this miniseries for this lesson, and that book is way better than I thought it was going to be because like we were talking about in the beginning, sometimes it is really, really difficult with these characters who have been relegated to a supporting role to have to step up and carry their own series just because they haven't been developed. But they do a really, really good job. Mera is still living on land, trying to sort everything out. She's not Arthur's wife. She's his fiance. And she winds up having to ally herself with Orm in order to get Atlantis back under control again. And she goes to Zebul and asks for their support. They wind up betraying her, but there's a lot of really excellent fight scenes here. And not only does Mera remain completely clothed the entire time. But I think the series does the best job of the in-continuity stories, showing you how powerful Mera is, how she doesn't need Arthur in order to be an absolute badass. And you get to see Tula again. So that's kind of where we leave her, because that series ended not too long ago. I didn't want to go into too many details to spoil it.
How long did it run?
It ran for about a year.
Okay.
I think it's 12 issues.
Cool.
So I'm not sure if they all released on time, but I'm going to say they did.
Yeah, who knows?
But it began in 2018, so it literally just ended, and that's about as close as I can get without spoiling stuff for you. So there you are. That is your Geek History lesson on Mera. Hooray! Shall we move into the recommended reading?
Yes, the recommended reading is where if you go to geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading, you can find all the choices that Ashley's going to tell you for all your Mera reading. You click on the widget, takes you to Amazon, you can pick up the book, and a little bit of that purchase comes back to the Mind University.
Heck yes. So I have 3 recommendations for you today. The first is one that we have recommended before, and that is Aquaman, The Death of a Prince, the deluxe edition. This has a lot of really great supplemental material as well. It has the whole arc of Mera's first time basically being a dynamic, real person. I cannot recommend the story enough. It's really, really, really good. And if you like Silver Age art, this is going to hit that spot. My next recommendation is going to be Mera, Queen of Atlantis. That is the first volume of her solo series with the amazing Nicola Scott covers. Truly so much better than I thought it had any right to be. I cannot recommend it enough if you have even a passing interest in Mera. And then I also want to recommend Mera Tidebreaker, which is the book that launched the DC Kids line, because I thought it was so cute, so great, so interesting. It is written by Danielle Paige, and I really think if you are
It's art by Stephen Byrne, right?
with art by Stephen Byrne.
He's really good.
Very, very sweet man who Jason and I will be able to afford one day. I'm speaking that into the universe, who's also working on Wonder Twins, really great artist. But if you want a fresh take on Mera, I think this is your easiest intro, because all you need to know is she's got water powers and everything else will be fine from there. So now let's move into the discussion portion of the show, where we are joined by New York Times best-selling author Danielle Paige, who, as previously mentioned, wrote Mera Tidebreaker. Hi, Danielle. Thank you for joining us on Geek History Lesson today.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
Listeners, you don't even know, we have been trying to make this episode happen for so long, and I'm so happy that we finally get to chat Mera with you today.
Me too. It's like it took the end of the world for us to finally get to talk together.
I know, right? Which is one of the few blessings that we can count from that. So I want to start by asking, because I know you have a long and storied career as a writer, from television to novels, now to the world of comic books. So for you as a writer, what was the transition like moving from traditional prose to graphic novel format?
For me, actually, I started as a scriptwriter. My first writing job was at Guiding Light. It's a soap opera that got canceled a long time ago.
Oh, my mom was a huge Guiding Light fan, so thank you very much for your work.
Yeah, so it was my mom and my grandmom and my sister. So when I was in college, I took an internship there and ended up working as a production assistant, and then a writer's assistant, and then a writer. And I wrote scripts for 5 years. So for me, I went from being a scriptwriter to being a prose writer to being, and then now coming back to comics. It's a new thing for me, but it feels very much like the soap experience, because there's a lot of characters, a lot of continuity, a lot of craziness. And so it's kind of like coming home in a way. I really love it.
But with more superpowers this time, right?
Yes, although we did have ghosts and clones and lots of a little bit of magic in the soap opera. So I have to say, there was a little bit of that there too.
That's really funny. What an interesting Venn diagram, right?
It is. And I remember speaking a lot with my editor and publisher, because Dan Didio was there at the time, because he had a soap background, about that. He actually worked for All My Children, and that connection, because soaps and comics have a lot in common, actually.
For sure. So, talking about the Mera of it all, how familiar were you with her when you came onto Tidebreaker?
I wasn't as much as I should have been. I knew about her, but when I made my original pitch, I actually pitched an Aquaman pitch. And
Ooh, interesting.
my first thought was like, what if Aquaman like has to choose between the land and the water, and there's a girl on land that he falls in love with, and then I read this whole pitch. It was called like I went kind of Little Mermaid with it. Like, what if the Aquaman's a Little Mermaid and he has to choose between the water and the land and the girl that he loves? And I honestly wrote this up, and I remember my editor said, we love this, but Aquaman always grows up on land and he doesn't know who he is yet. And but Mera has this. Mera might be a better take. And I switched my story and like learned everything I could about her. And I think it actually turned out so much better because I don't know if everyone knows as much about her. And it became this kind of fun story about her trying to kill him, but then falling in love.
Did that give you more freedom because she had less rules that she came with than Aquaman?
I think so. And I love writing like powerful women. So for me, it was a kind of a natural fit and just so much fun. And we still got to have Aquaman in the story and he's adorable. So I got kind of the best of both worlds.
Heck yeah. And you also kind of got to do Mera's first solo outing because her standalone series came out after Tidebreaker.
I know. I feel like I really lucked out on, and I know there's so many Mera fans out there who have received this well, and I was so glad.
So I'm reasonably sure that you don't have aquakinesis, but were there certain aspects of Mera's character that you connected with personally when you started working on her?
I mean, I love a tough girl who is who is kind of fighting for the things that she wants and figuring things out. I love characters who get to change, and I think that that's kind of like her big superpower. Like everyone always says when they're talking about Aquaman, he's like the savior because he's caught between these worlds. But Mera is actually really caught between like 3 worlds. Like, so I feel like she is just as powerful and just as important, and she's making a choice based on having like grown up in this place with people who wanted something different than what she decides she wants. And like that ability to change your mind and figure out what's right is so important.
Nice. So how do you pronounce Mera's homeworld? Xebel.
I say Zebel, and if I'm wrong, please tell me. Because I've been to Comic-Cons, and I bet no one's corrected me, and I worry that I'm doing it wrong.
I think it's one of those things sort of like what Game of Thrones was for a long time, where you're like, well, I've never heard it. This is what I say.
Right.
I wanted to get, as an expert, I wanted to get your official rendition, Zebel or Zebel.
I feel like I say Zebel, and when I first got to DC, I think that I asked an archivist about it, and this is the way he said it, but I heard it wrong, and then it's still my fault. So I don't know. So but this is what I think it is.
I was definitely a Zebel gal, but then I kept hearing people say Zebel Heart, like Rebel Heart, and I was like, oh, I guess I'm wrong. Because it seems like you're on the side of the fan base for sure.
Okay, good. But if it's the other way around, tell me if you find out.
Very nicely. We love corrections as long as they are done professionally and kindly.
I want to know.
Somebody, I'm sure, after this will pop right into your Twitter feed. Yeah. So I was very fortunate to get to read an early copy of Tidebreaker and write about it. And one of my favorite things about Mera is how powerful she is. In my opinion, she is more powerful than Aquaman. And I love
that article.
Thank you. And I wanted to ask you, Danielle, how powerful do we think Mera really is?
I think she's more powerful than him. She's spent her entire life learning how to use her powers, whereas when we meet Arthur, he's just learning who he is. So I think she totally beats him.
Interesting. I'd love to see that in a movie. I hope they lift some of your scenes. It would be so great. So
I think eventually, obviously, he will catch up. But I do think that, like, honestly, like she's spent, like, if you spend your whole life learning how to use your powers versus someone who just found them on Tuesday, like, I think that there's a difference.
Well, I think some people in the Star Wars universe might disagree with you about that.
I love Star Wars too.
Oh, of course, but the joke is easy to be made. So with Tidebreaker, you sort of exist outside of the DC universe. You're like an Elseworlds in this very unique way.
Yes.
So did you find some unique challenges when you were reestablishing this character for not only a new audience, but for a whole new continuity?
I thought it was, honestly, like having that freedom is great. Like you get to, like, I feel like as long as I didn't step on anything that is true for the character. I had that freedom. I hope that no one's upset at me for what I did, but I feel like I tried to keep the spirit of her and of him.
Was there anything from some of the comics that you looked at in your research that you really wanted to sneak into the story, but you weren't able to? Maybe for a sequel?
I really wanted, I would love to see a sequel. I don't know what DC's plans are right now. I have a couple other DC projects in the works that are not Mera, and but I would love to revisit her. I mean, when I started writing this, like, I wrote an epilogue where you get to see her go. I don't want to reveal what happens in the end of the book, but I did write what I thought happened next. So I would love to revisit that.
Aw, I would love to see that. Also, if people want to see that, tweet at DC Comics.
Yes.
So how much of Mera's traditional culture did you get to put your own stamp on? Because we do see a lot of Zabel compared to in different Mera stories in the past.
Well, I feel like I got to make up a little bit of stuff, and my artist did too. Like, I did what I thought it would be like, and I wanted to. I tried to incorporate what was happening for teenagers in the world at the time, in our world, because honestly, when I wrote this, I originally wrote like a scene about my opening scene was Mera like sneaking out and going to a party and then getting in trouble and having to protect her best friend. And then at the same time in the real world, like we were looking at Charlottesville and what was happening in Florida with the school shootings. And I just didn't feel right what I wrote. I felt like, honestly, like kids are going through such really big stuff in the real world that I wanted to capture that in this book. And I made her, like, she was going out to like protest in her own way, and she like did some graffiti on a wall, and that was her way of protesting, because she's a princess and she'd get caught if she joined a regular protest. And so I tried to incorporate a little bit of real world into Zebel.
If anything, I think that's even more prescient for people who are reading the book now than even when it came out.
Oh, I mean, who knew that this is the world that we would have this summer?
Are you psychic?
I am not. Yeah, I really hope not, because my books are very dark. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Also, special shout out to Stephen Byrne, your incredible artist who works on Tidebreaker with you. We love him here on the show.
And he does Wonder Twins, and he has another project that's coming up that I'm so excited about. He is so brilliant, and he made the book so beautiful, and he brought so much to Zebel, like all the touches of like the underwater, like there's a cup where you can drink underwater, like there's just all these little details that I had not thought of, he thought of. And I just love him, and his work is so beautiful.
Also, as a North American person, I find his accent to be delightful.
Well, Stephen is dreamy. If you haven't seen Stephen, I gotta say.
Go give him a follow on Instagram.
Super, super humble. And he's like, I know, I hate to be photographed. It's like, if I were you, I would be photographed all the time.
Oh, man. You're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong. All right. I have one more question that I like to close out these interviews with, because we do have a lot of people who are creatives or who are trying to be professional creatives. So, Danielle, what is your best advice to new creators who want to break into comics?
Oh, wow. Okay, I will do that. But I want to say one more thing about Stephen.
Oh, sure.
Stephen and I both came up with the idea of making Arthur look like Jason Momoa, and we fought for it, and we're so glad we got it, because it's the only representation of Jason in the DC world other than on the covers, other than on variant covers. Mm-hmm. So we're so excited to have that. And I got to show Jason that at Comic-Con in person, and he was so lovely. So he was very excited to see himself.
That's so fascinating, because I would have expected that would have been a mandate, because Tidebreaker came out very concurrently to when Aquaman was coming out.
Did.
So I would have thought that, someone from on high was like, hey, he has to look like Jason. So cool to know that was your choice. The beauty of it being out of continuity was that we got to do it, because he's usually very blonde and also still very cute. But I think Jason is so cute. And we looked at Baywatch pictures, and I sent them to my editor. I'm like, can we please do this now? And eventually she said yes. So nice.
Okay. And then advice to comic book writers.
Yeah.
I would say, God, it's so hard. I think that there's so many avenues to write now in comics, And there's so many, like, as a writer in general, there's so many more chances that you have. Like, make your own comics, find ways to tell your stories, because someone's going to see them. Like, I think that you have to just keep after it, because I feel like I've changed from one genre to another throughout my career because I want to be a working writer. And I think that if you want to be a working writer, you're not just one piece of work or one type of writing. There's so much out there for you.
Perfect. Well, very well said. So where can people find you all over the internet? Where can they support you? Where can they send you money? Anything like that.
You can look up, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Danielle M. Paige. And then my website is daniellepagebooks.com. I have a new book coming out, The Ravens, in November, which is a sorority witch book, which I think would be a great comic.
Nice.
And look for more DC stuff for me. I'm really excited.
Thank you so much for joining us, Danielle. Like I said earlier, I've been dying to talk to you, so this has been a real treat. You've always been so lovely and kind to me.
So have you.
Even when I was like, I want to buy one of your signed books, where do I buy it? You slid right in with the link. So I'm so glad we got to bring you on and we got to talk about Mera. And hopefully we can have you on in the future to chat more DC stuff.
I hope we get to see each other in person soon. Okay, stay safe, everybody.
That was so great, so exciting. We have been trying to get Danielle for ages, so I'm glad that worked out.
Yeah, she's a great writer.
From across time zones. All right, now we're going to move into the honor roll section of the show.
Okay, the honor roll. Ashley, did you move away from the teaching tweet?
Oh, no, I have the teaching tweet, but I guess I put it below the honor roll. We're going to do the teaching tweet. Jason's favorite part of the show.
I will allow this segment this week will be if I get to do an alternate.
Okay.
The teaching tweet is where, look, we created this segment where, you remember when Twitter used to only give you 140 characters? We thought it'd be fun to do that, to like boil down the essence of the lesson into 140, and we still do it. So here it is. You can read this tweet at GHL Podcast.
Alrighty. Mera, what if The Little Mermaid and Avatar The Last Airbender created a badass underwater lady? Her name would be Mera. And we're going to go take two. Jason, we are ready in 3, 2, 1.
And as the elders of our time choose to remain blind, let us rejoice, and let us sing and dance and ring in the new. Hail Mera!
Hail Mera! Is it Hail Mary?
It's Hail Atlantis.
Oh.
And that leads you into the way down below. I could just play it.
No, I like it better when you just
That's
sing.
how, like, so, okay, the references that I was making this entire song is this song called Atlantis by Donovan. Came out in the 60s, I believe. But it has this giant monologue where nobody is singing, where he just goes,
and the great Egyptian age is but a remnant of the Atlantean culture, and the Antediluvian kings colonized the world, and all the gods who play in the mythological dramas, and all the legends from all the lands were from fair Atlantis.
And then it goes into this way down below the ocean where I want to be, and he just repeats the chorus over and over and over. But the Beatles love Donovan, and so do I.
There you go.
Just was too good to not talk about Atlantis.
Now, shall we do the honor roll?
Yes, the honor roll, friends,
Antediluvian kings,
and many others. You can go to iTunes, now called Apple Podcasts, and you leave us a 5-star review. And if you do, whatever you write, we will read on the podcast if you give us 5 stars. And international listeners, if you give us 5 stars in your international Apple Podcast, you're going to have to email us that. Take a little screenshot, email it to geekhistorylesson@gmail.com. We'll read it on the air as well.
Heck yes. So we have 3 people joining the honor roll today. The first is Elvis King 1, who says, Geek History Lesson. Geek History Lesson is awesome, very informative. Now kneel before Geek History Lesson. I love that.
Short applause.
And they are also joined by Damon Alex, who says, great show. I stumbled across your podcast on YouTube while I was doing a college essay on Spider-Man Blue.
Cool.
And after that, I was obsessed. Smiley face crying emoji. I love the show and appreciate how much you guys care about your listeners. Keep up the good work. And last but not least, they are joined by Staru Film, who says, You are better than this. Well, they gave us 5 stars. Look, I enjoy your podcast, but not even mentioning it, acknowledging what is going on in the world right now on your live podcast. I'm sure how to keep on listening. So I'll tell you this, Jason, everyone will be happier when you're like 1% less quick to throw Ashley under the bus when she messes up. She doesn't do that to you. You're both cool and you're smart. But with all your privilege in your audience, it really would mean a lot to take a moment to do something, to say something. Best of luck, y'all.
Well, we did.
We did.
It was called the Black Heroes Matter.
And also, we donated to Black Lives Matter.
I'll give
we
you
encourage
this.
people to. But we did say, if you gave us 5 stars,
Yeah,
we
we'll
would
read
read
it.
whatever you write.
But I'm also going to give you. So.
Also, I want to say that I'm not hurt or offended or bothered. So, and I will also say that I don't need people to defend me. I got it.
Yeah, I don't care.
So
we will read whatever you write.
Thank you.
But we also reserve the right to give you
comment.
a lot of crap.
So thank you, Staru Film, for bumping us in the algorithm. I hope. I appreciate that. I really do, because that helps us find new listeners. Thank you, Damon Alex, and thank you, Elvis King 1. Professor Jason, what is going on in the Teacher's Lounge today?
Teacher's Lounge is empty. It's actually a Sunday.
Hey, that's fair. Go do some laps in the pool. I'm sure Professor Mera's out there.
Hey, there she is.
All right, and that's our honor roll.
Cool. Don't forget to subscribe and download and listen to this podcast on Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, all the places you can listen to podcasts. And you can follow this podcast on social media. Where, Ashley?
You can do that at geekhistorylesson.com, facebook.com/geekhistorylesson, or on Twitter at GHL Podcast.
You can follow me on Twitter at Jawiin, Jawiin, and Instagram with the same same username. You can follow Ashley on Instagram and Twitter at Ashley V Robinson. And don't forget patreon.com/Jawiin. We do so many exclusive podcasts over there, including Geek History Lesson Extra, which is to give you a little bit more in Geek History Lesson. Ashley, what's the Geek History Lesson episode this week?
On this week's Geek History Lesson Extra, we are going to pitch Aquaman 2.
Or just
we're going to talk about Aquaman 2.
We're going to spitball ideas for Aquaman 2.
Yes, but the title will probably be Pitch Aquaman 2.
Yes. All right, now we're to the last section of this podcast. Hashtag stick around.
Jason.
Okay.
What is your favorite representation of Atlantis in any media?
In any media?
Yeah. Because I will say, Aquaman and Mera, for the most part, don't have a lot of diversity of representation. I mean, Is Mera in Smallville?
No, but Aquaman is.
Arthur is. So I want to...
Mera's in Justice League Animated.
She is, but
she's also in the Justice League Throne of Atlantis movie.
Yes, but their versions in both of those are very close to the comics.
Sure. So you're looking for different Meras?
No,
is Mera in DC Superhero Girls?
Yes, she is.
Okay.
But no, my question is what's your favorite fictional version of Atlantis? I mean, they're all fictional.
I don't have an answer for this.
I really thought you were going to say Stargate Atlantis.
It's early. Look, it's early morning, man.
It's almost noon.
It's early morning for me. What's yours? Sorry, you kind of just dumbfounded me. I was
like, stick around doesn't have to be long or insightful.
Yeah. Thinking about Atlantis is, I'm like, I don't know.
My favorite version of Atlantis is super easy. It's The Little Mermaid.
Isn't that technically Poseidonus? But I'll let it count. But yeah.
Well,
they call it something different, don't they?
They live in Atlantis.
It is Atlantis.
Yeah.
But don't they call it something different?
No.
I swear to God they do.
I don't think so.
I think they do.
Where does the Little Mermaid live? She lives in Atlantica. I'm so sorry. Where does Prince Eric live?
was that throwing you under the bus?
No,
like that person said?
No, it's fine. You were correct. It's not throwing me under the bus. It also says that Prince Eric is the prince on the surface land of Atlantica. Prince Eric lives in Denmark because the Little Mermaid is Danish.
But they never say Denmark, do they?
No, but I mean, I don't think they
Danish.
They don't say Atlantica. They might say
Atlantica.
They might say Atlantica in the subsequent sequels or in the television show. They never say it in the movie, so I always just assumed it was Atlantis.
I always knew that it was not Atlantis because Disney always changes stuff like that because they're always afraid of lawsuits. But
Atlantis is like fully public domain.
I think they say Atlantica in that sister song where the sisters are singing.
In the opening?
Yes.
In The Daughters of Triton?
Yeah, I think they say Atlantica in that.
Daughters of Triton, great father who loves
I don't
the
know.
same does
But
he?
I've always known for a long time.
I don't know. I don't even know all the words to that song.
I've always known for a long time that she did not live in Atlantis.
Did you have, if you have tiny little humans, maybe cover their ears?
Oh.
Or pause this and come back?
Okay.
Did you have the dirty version of the Little Mermaid DVD?
What do you mean?
Of the Little Mermaid VHS?
What's the dirty version?
The one that has the male genitalia on the cover?
What?
You don't know about
What?
this?
Will you tell me some details about this? I have no idea what you're talking about.
The Little Mermaid VHS copies from the 90s
Okay.
have a penis on them.
How do they have a penis on them?
The main, you can literally Google it. The main tower of Atlantica behind Ariel and Eric is a penis.
It's the VHS cover?
It's a VHS cover. I had it growing up
I'm Googling this right now.
because I remember being told about it. It was like that and the sex in the stars in The Lion King were like the big controversies of 90s Disney's movies.
Oh, I see it. Okay, so I'm looking at the video cover.
Yeah.
That's a stretch. I'm sorry. That is not intentional. I think that's people just being ridiculous.
Well, they redesigned it when the DVD came out.
Well, of course they did.
Because I think a bunch of
course
parental
they did.
groups got all up in
I even found fact check. Was the phallus purposely added to the artwork of the Little Mermaid VHS cover?
I'm going to bet yes. I'm going to bet somebody did that as a joke and then got found out.
Apparently, yes. The phallic object has been deliberately drawn as a last act of defiance by a disgruntled Disney artist who was miffed at being notified that he'd be laid off. Oh, no. Okay, so that's the rumor. That's what everybody thinks it is. The plain truth is it's completely coincidental. The artist who created the video cover did not work for Disney.
Interesting.
It was worked for a separate branding company, which, whatever.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we cleared that up.
It actually says that, contrary to common belief, the phallic-like spire did not make its first appearance on the cover of the home video version. The same background drawing of the castle with the same spires, including the phallic one, appeared in promotional material and posters that accompanied the film's original theatrical release. The video cover does not differ from those versions. It's the Laserdisc cover that was changed.
When did people stop using laser discs?
Late 90s, right before DVDs.
Really?
Yeah.
I never knew a human being who used a laser disc.
I knew one guy, and they always just seemed so clunky and terrible.
Yeah, I mean, look, the art is great because it's much bigger.
Sure.
Thank you for sticking around for this nonsense, friends.
Yeah, that was definitely some nonsense there. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you. I thought this was a great episode. I hope you didn't mind the Atlantis jokes and the Little Mermaid jokes. I am Jason Under the Sea Inman.
I am Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And Professor Ashley, please dismiss us.
Class is now dismissed.